Hi folks, this is Tony for aminutetomidnight.com. Please make sure you subscribe to us at our website aminutetomidnight.com by going down the right hand side of the page and entering your email address where it says subscribe to blog. There are a few things I want to cover in this video, generally about the global government, the moves towards global governance. And first off, I want to bring to your attention UN report called Pact for the Future. That's Pact as in P-A-C-T. So for the beginning I want to read a bit from Summit News. I'll just read it, not the whole article, but word for word what is in there and part of it. Report: UN Pact for the Future seeks permanent emergency powers for complex global shocks. Any new major event will see globalists attempt to take complete control. The UN is set to outline a far-reaching plan to secure emergency powers that would allow the global body to lead a common agenda for all nations during any complex global shocks, such as a new pandemic. The Federalist reports that the plan is to be finalised at a September 2024 Summit of the Future, where the UN will adopt a pact for the future to include policies that have been outlined in the globalist body's Our Common Agenda report. One such policy is an emergency platform during any events that have a global impact that would provide the UN the authority to actively promote and drive an international response that places the principle of equity and solidarity at the centre of its work. The report notes that some details of the emergency plan were outlined in a paper from March, with the UN Secretary-General declaring, "I propose that the General Assembly provide the Secretary-General and the United Nations system with a standing authority to convene and operationalise automatically an emergency platform in the event of a future complex global shock of sufficient scale, severity and reach." The paper gives several examples of what could trigger the emergency authority, including major climatic event, future pandemic risks, a global digital collectivity disruption, major event in outer space, and generic unforeseen risks, black swan events. It goes on to suggest that the UN would have the power to oversee the stakeholders of the world, including academics, governments, private sector actors, and international financial institutions, to ensure there is a unified global response to whatever crisis is declared. The paper further suggests that such authority would ensure that all participating actors make commitments that can contribute meaningfully to the response and that they are held to account for delivery of those commitments. It also states that while the emergency authority would have an initial finite lifespan, the UN would be able to extend it indefinitely if it saw fit to do so. So I'm now going to read some parts directly from the UN Common Agenda Summit of the Future, their own website. The Summit of the Future, September 2024, is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to enhance cooperation on critical challenges and address gaps in global governance. Note that word, see, they're telling you exactly where this is going, global governance. Reaffirming existing commitments, including the Sustainable Development Goals and the United Nations Charter, and move towards a reinvigorated multilateral system that is better positioned to positively impact people's lives. How they always spin these things to make it sound like a good thing when really what it is all about control. Major global shocks in recent years, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine war, and the triple planetary crisis, among others, have challenged our international institutions. Unity around our shared principles and common goals is both crucial and urgent. So they say anyway. Is it really urgent? No, I don't believe it is. The Summit of the Future is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to enhance cooperation on critical challenges and address gaps in global governance, reaffirm existing commitments, including to the Sustainable Development Goals and the United Nations Charter, and move towards a reinvigorated multilateral system that is better positioned to positively impact people's lives. Building on the SDG Summit in 2023, member states will consider ways to lay the foundations for more effective global cooperation that can deal with today's challenges as well as new threats in the future. An action-oriented Pact for the future is expected to be agreed by member states through intergovernmental negotiations on issues they decide to take forward. Better respond to global shocks. Put in place a stronger international response playbook for the complex global shocks, maximising the use of the Secretary General's convening power in the form of an emergency platform. So in other words, countries will secede their sovereignty to the UN basically and give their power over to the United Nations in a whatever shock they deem that they need to invoke the emergency powers. And so therefore all the member states that have agreed to it, which will probably be most of the world, that's their aim anyway, will secede their power to the Secretary General of the UN to decide what each country should do collectively. So no more individual countries deciding what they want to do, which is not good in my opinion at all. It's global governance. They're very clear about what this is. Reform the international financial architecture to ensure it delivers more effectively and fairly for everyone, and particularly the global south, including through objectives that are aligned with the SDGs, debt sustainability, a global financial safety net, and more. So that's just a few of the things that they cover. There's a lot more. I can see a number of possible scenarios being used by the global elite through the UN, the WHO and the WEF, etc., as an excuse to enact these powers outlined in the Pact for the Future. The goal is ultimately world government, and with it a system of control over the population of the entire world, something like Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World combined. The COVID-19 pandemic proved how easy it was to get the world herded into obedience through censorship of any contrary facts that threatened the narrative, no matter how factual they were, we were all supposed to swallow hook, line and sinker the narrative that they presented to us. Of course, many people didn't, but their voice was very limited because of censorship and so forth. Possibilities of things that we could see them using. The possibilities of climate change related lockdowns. They're already trying to elicit fear of climate change heat waves even over the last couple of days, claiming things like a remarkable spate of historic heat is hitting the planet, raising alarm over looming extreme weather dangers and an increasing likelihood that this year will be Earth's warmest on record. That's from the Washington Post. Of course, when they're saying it's Earth's warmest on record, they've changed the way they read temperatures, the type of thermometers they use and so forth, where they place them. It's all designed to make things look in line with their goals, whether it's factual or not. So the globalist 15-minute cities mirror Hunger Games, and this comes from truthbasedmedia.com. Over the past several years, the World Economic Forum has been promoting the implementation of an urban planning concept called the 15-minute city, sometimes abbreviated as FMC. This is described as arranging an urban area in such a way that most daily necessities such as going to work, buying food and clothing, going to school, visiting the doctor and engaging in leisure and entertainment can all be done within a 15-minute walk or bicycle ride from any point of the city. According to its proponents, this would be a convenient way to reduce car dependency, promote healthy and sustainable living, improve the well-being and quality of life of residents, and greatly reduce carbon emissions in the ongoing fight against climate change. Under the guise of climate change prevention, car ownership and use would be eliminated over time, making it too expensive and limiting the infrastructure to sustain it. Roadblocks and gates would be erected over time throughout the city, along with restrictions on the freedom of movement. Constant surveillance would characterise life, turning the 15-minute city into an open-air prison similar to the districts in the Hunger Games. Efforts are underway in Paris, Melbourne, Milan, Oxford and a number of other cities around the world to implement this supposedly convenient form of urban planning that some critics call WEF ghettos. Of course, they'll limit air travel too, and this is all under the guise of saving the planet from climate change. But really, it's all about control. That's what they want, is control over the entire population. And here's another example. Today, the Netherlands, tomorrow the world. Dutch farmers beaten by police protest the seizure of 3,000 plus farms to make way for immigrant housing on the orders of Klaus Schwab. While France burns, let's all keep an eye on Holland because what's happening there will also happen here unless the people stop it, writes Mark Crispin Miller in an article on his Substack. Under orders from Klaus Schwab, Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, has expropriated 3,000 farms from Dutch farmers, driving the farmers off the land to make way for mass immigration housing. The world's already in a food shortage, and these types of draconian measures are outrageous. They're only going to serve to make the food crisis worse. But again, I believe that's the goal, because they want to control everyone, and hungry people are very easy to control. So another possibility, besides the climate change, being the thing they invoke with the new UN's Pact for the future, the possibility that they could use a new pandemic as an excuse to use the UN emergency powers. So remember this, they had an exercise called Catastrophic Contagion. I don't know, I'm sure some of you will remember it. It was a fictional tabletop exercise in partnership with the WHO and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the WHO and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, conducted Catastrophic Contagion, a pandemic tabletop exercise at the Grand Challenges annual meeting in Brussels in Belgium on October the 23rd, 2022. Participants grappled with how to respond to an epidemic located in one part of the world that then spread rapidly, becoming a pandemic with a higher fatality rate than COVID-19 and disproportionately affecting children and young people. So that's straight from the Catastrophic Contagion website, that bit, by the way. And so though they claim it was a fictional scenario and simulation, if you look at it, it was timed, according to the simulation, to fictionally occur in 2025. Interestingly, that will be shortly after the WHO Pandemic Treaty is set to be unleashed, and the UN Pact for the Future is set to be unveiled as well. And if you remember Event 201, they planned it out perfectly. They did Event 201, outlining everything they wanted to do in the future pandemic, and 2 months later they rolled out the COVID-19 pandemic and basically outworked the entire scenario that they had created in their pandemic practice run called Event 201. And the Catastrophic Contagion may be exactly the same scenario where they've practiced it out and they'll implement it in 2025, which is the date outlined fictionally in it. Now, maybe it won't work out that way, but I will be keeping my eyes closely on it. Another thing is the possibility of nuclear war involving NATO and Russia, or a war around China and Taiwan. I won't go too much into that, but there's more and more war-mongering, saber-rattling talk of nuclear explosions and so on in the media all the time at the moment. So it could be that they'll unleash something along those lines in the near future as well. Another very strong possibility is that of a huge global financial collapse leading to the introduction of central bank digital currencies managed by a global body. And we looked at that in some depth in the last minute to in the last A Minute to Midnight video I did about a week or so ago. So there's a lot of information in that video about the central bank digital currencies and so on. So just recently, following Brexit leader Nigel Farage revealing that 9 banks in the UK have refused him accounts, a slew of people mostly holding right-wing or conservative-leaning beliefs have revealed they also have faced similar Chinese communist-style debanking in Britain. According to a report from The Telegraph, the transgenderism critical parents group called Our Duty, which represents over 2,000 parents who are concerned about children being encouraged into medically transitioning the agenda, have been refused a new bank account at Metro Bank. And I mean, there are countless other accounts of people whose bank accounts and so forth have been closed without adequate explanation and so forth. So this could happen to anyone who's not in line with globalist policies even now. But how much easier it would be for them to do it, do something like that in a globalist controlled world that uses central bank digital currencies. The global digital currency they are creating will result in the elimination of cash, with digital currency being the only one accepted in the new world economic order. This digital currency will be the mechanism by which they will control your finances and the finances of every person on earth. And by controlling your finances, they will ultimately control you. And central banks have been quietly buying up as much gold and silver, that's the physical stuff, as possible in preparation for these central bank digital currencies and the eventual bursting of the everything bubble, which may not be too far away. That would appear to show me that precious metals and other commodities will be used to back the central bank digital currencies. Now, I think we all should be doing what we can to prepare as best we can. The book of Proverbs even tells us that, the prudent prepare. But also we can't live in fear of what's coming. And I think I just want to close by reading some scripture that, Jesus spoke, which will apply to us now and in the future as much as it did back then. This is from Luke chapter 12 and verse 22. Then he said to his disciples, "Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, nor about the body, what you'll put on. Life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which have neither storehouse nor barn, and God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin, and yet I just say to you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothes the grass which today is in the field and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you should eat or what you should drink, nor have an anxious mind, for all these things the nations of the world seek after. And your Father knows that you need these things, but seek the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you." So that's all I wanted to cover in this video today. So don't be afraid, but do prepare as much as you can. Ask God how to do it. It'll be different for everyone. By the way, A Minute to Midnight's run 100% by donations, and if you're able to help us, that's always appreciated. If you go to our website, aminutoMidnight.com, and look at the donations page, it will tell you how you can do that. And as I said earlier, please subscribe to our website. Well, God bless, stay safe, and hopefully we'll be back in a few days with another video.